I'm Scarlett, 28 years old, and I thought I knew my family. Standing in my childhood kitchen last Christmas holding that perfectly crafted invitation to my golden child brother's engagement party, I felt the familiar sting of being the afterthought. Mom barely looked up from her phone when she said it. "We're only inviting you out of pity, so don't stay long." I just smiled, but something cold settled in my chest. What I discovered 3 months later about the family fortune would shatter everything I believed about blood loyalty and who really deserved that pity. Hey everyone, before we dive into this wild family drama that completely flipped my world upside down, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever felt like the black sheep in your family, this story might hit close to home. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe because trust me, you'll want to see how this revenge story unfolds. The twists coming up will leave you questioning everything you know about family loyalty. 3 months after that humiliating Christmas encounter, I was cleaning out my late grandmother's attic when everything unraveled. Grandma Rose had passed suddenly in February, and somehow the task of sorting through her belongings fell to me. The family disappointment, the one who never amounted to anything, according to my mother's constant reminders. My brother Jake, the golden child with his finance degree and six-figure salary, was too busy planning his lavish engagement party with his equally pretentious fiancée Madison. Mom was too occupied playing wedding planner and bragging to her country club friends about her successful son to bother with something as mundane as deceased parent cleanup duty. So there I was, covered in dust and decades of accumulated memories, when I found the metal lockbox hidden beneath a pile of old quilts. The key was taped to the bottom, and my hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were documents that would rewrite my entire understanding of my family's dynamics. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds, and most shocking of all, a will dated just 6 months before Grandma's death, completely different from the one that had been read at the lawyer's office. According to the official will, Jake inherited Grandma's entire estate, the house worth $800,000, her investment portfolio valued at over $2 million, and various other assets. I got her costume jewelry and some old furniture, which everyone agreed was appropriate for someone at my level. But this hidden will told a different story entirely. In her own handwriting, Grandma had left everything to me. The note attached explained why Scarlett has always been the kindness in this family. She visited me every week, helped with my medications, listened to my stories. Jake only called when he needed money, and my daughter Patricia treats me like an obligation. Scarlett deserves to build the life she's dreamed of, free from this family's cruelty. My heart pounded as I read further. There were copies of emails between my mother and Jake discussing how they'd convinced Grandma that I was irresponsible and couldn't handle money. They'd isolated her during her final months, limiting my visits by telling her I was too busy to come see her. They'd even forged documents to create the fake will. But the most devastating discovery was a series of recorded conversations on a small digital device. Grandma, suspicious of their sudden attention and worried about my absence, had secretly recorded their visits. I listened in horror as Mom and Jake openly discussed their plan to steal my inheritance. "She'll never know." Jake's voice crackled through the speaker. "Scarlett's too naive and trusting. Besides, what would she do with that much money anyway? Probably waste it on her ridiculous art projects." Mom's laughter was sharp and cold. "Exactly. We're really doing her a favor. This money will be put to much better use funding your business expansion and Madison's wedding expenses. Scarlett will be fine with whatever scraps we throw her." They discussed forging Grandma's signature, bribing the lawyer, and creating false medical records suggesting Grandma was mentally incompetent when she wrote the real will. They'd stolen not just my inheritance, but my final months with the one person in my family who truly loved me. I sat on that dusty attic floor, surrounded by the evidence of my family's betrayal, and something fundamental shifted inside me. The hurt was overwhelming, but beneath it burned something I'd never felt before. Cold, calculated anger. For 28 years, I'd been the family scapegoat. The daughter who disappointed everyone by choosing art over business, who made poor life choices by prioritizing creativity over wealth, who was too sensitive when their constant criticism wore me down. I'd spent decades trying to earn their love, accepting their breadcrumbs of affection, believing I somehow deserved their disdain. But now, I understood the truth. They hadn't rejected me because I was inadequate. They'd systematically destroyed my confidence and isolated me because they feared what I might become with resources and support. Grandma had seen my potential, and they'd stolen both her love and her legacy. I carefully photographed every document, uploaded the audio recordings to multiple cloud accounts, and researched the legal implications of will fraud. The evidence was overwhelming, and in my state, will fraud carried serious criminal penalties, including jail time and massive financial restitution. But as I sat there planning my next move, I realized something important. I didn't just want my inheritance back. I wanted them to experience the same humiliation, isolation, and powerlessness they'd inflicted on me for years. I wanted justice, but I also wanted them to understand exactly what they'd lost when they chose greed over family. That night, I made copies of everything and secured them in 3 different locations. I opened new bank accounts and consulted with a lawyer who specialized in estate fraud. But I didn't file charges immediately. Instead, I began planning something much more satisfying. Jake's engagement party was still 6 weeks away. The party they'd grudgingly invited me to out of pity. The celebration funded by money that was rightfully mine, thrown by people who'd stolen from their own family member. They expected me to show up, play the role of grateful lesser sibling, and disappear quietly into the background. They had no idea that their discarded daughter had just discovered the power to destroy everything they'd built on lies. For the first time in my life, I held all the cards and I was going to play them perfectly. I spent that night reading legal precedents and planning my strategy. By dawn, I knew exactly how this would unfold, and it would be far more devastating than they could imagine. The next 6 weeks transformed me in ways I never imagined possible. Gone was the people-pleasing daughter who apologized for existing. In her place emerged someone calculating, focused, and absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting what was mine. I threw myself into preparation with the same dedication I'd once reserved for my art. Every detail mattered, every move needed to be perfectly calculated. This wasn't just about recovering stolen money. This was about dismantling the power structure that had oppressed me my entire life. First, I strengthened my legal position. My attorney, Margaret Chen, was a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in estate fraud cases. When I showed her the evidence, her eyes lit up with professional excitement. "This is one of the clearest cases of will fraud I've ever seen," she said, examining Grandma's real handwriting against the forged documents. The audio recordings alone would be enough to secure convictions, but combined with the paper trail, this is absolutely airtight. We developed a timeline. The criminal charges would be filed immediately after the engagement party, giving me maximum impact when their world collapsed. But Margaret suggested something even more strategic. Civil suits take time, but we can freeze their assets immediately once fraud charges are filed. Every penny they've spent of your grandmother's money will need to be returned with interest and penalties. We're looking at treble damages here. They'll owe you nearly $9 million when this is finished. $9 million. The number echoed in my head as I planned the next phase. While they were spending my inheritance on parties and business ventures, I was building the case that would destroy them financially and legally. But the money was only part of my revenge. I wanted them to experience the social humiliation they'd subjected me to for years. I wanted their friends, colleagues, and community to see them exactly as they were, thieves who stole from family. I began documenting their spending patterns. Jake's new BMW purchased 3 months after Grandma's death. Mom's kitchen renovation completed with inheritance money just before Christmas. Madison's designer engagement ring bought with funds that should have been mine. I researched their social connections, professional relationships, and community standing. Jake worked at a prestigious investment firm where ethical conduct was paramount. Mom served on the boards of several charity organizations, building her reputation on her supposed moral character. Madison's family owned a chain of boutique hotels that prided themselves on old money class and integrity. All of these carefully constructed images would crumble when the truth emerged. I also began rebuilding relationships they'd poisoned. I reached out to extended family members, many of whom expressed surprise at my absence during Grandma's final months. When I gently explained that Mom had told me I wasn't welcome to visit so frequently, their reactions were telling. "That's not what Rose wanted at all," my great-aunt Helen said during a coffee meeting. "She asked about you constantly. She was so hurt when you stopped coming to see her." I didn't reveal the full truth yet, but I planted seeds. Soon, our extended family began questioning the narrative they'd been fed about my supposed neglect of Grandma. The foundation of Mom and Jake's reputation was already showing cracks. During this time, I also made a crucial decision about my own life. I'd been working as a freelance graphic designer, barely making ends meet, while my family criticized my unstable career choice. But I'd always dreamed of opening my own gallery, showcasing emerging artists who, like me, felt overlooked by traditional art establishments. I began quietly scouting locations and developing business plans. When I reclaimed my inheritance, I wouldn't just be seeking revenge. I'd be building the life Grandma had wanted me to have. The life my family had tried to steal from me. 3 weeks before the engagement party, I received a call from Jake that almost made me laugh out loud. His voice was strained, almost desperate, though he tried to hide it. "Hey, Scarlett, I know we haven't talked much lately, but I was wondering if you might want to help with some of the party planning. Madison's feeling a bit overwhelmed, and Mom thought maybe you could contribute." Something artistic. Translation: their party budget was running low and they wanted free labor from the family disappointment. The irony was delicious. They were asking me to help plan a celebration funded by my stolen money. "Of course," I said sweetly. "I'd love to help." "What exactly did you have in mind?" "Well, maybe you could design some signage or decorations. Nothing too elaborate, just something personal and meaningful." I smiled into the phone. "I have the perfect idea. Something that will really capture the essence of your relationship and your values as a family. Trust me, it'll be unforgettable." Jake sounded relieved. "That would be amazing. We really appreciate you being such a good sport about everything." A good sport. After they'd stolen millions from me and poisoned my dying grandmother against me, they wanted me to be a good sport. "Don't mention it," I replied. Family is everything, right? After hanging up, I sat in my apartment planning exactly what artistic contribution I would make to their celebration. It would indeed be personal and meaningful, just not in the way they expected. I spent the remaining weeks perfecting every detail. The legal documents were prepared and ready to file. The evidence was organized and backed up in multiple secure locations. My allies were in place, though they didn't know they were allies yet. Most importantly, I'd found something I'd lost years ago: my own power. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't reacting to my family's cruelty or trying to earn their approval. I was setting the terms, controlling the narrative, and they had no idea what was coming. The night before the engagement party, I laid out my outfit. A simple black dress that would help me blend into the background just as they'd always wanted. But tomorrow, I wouldn't be hiding in anyone's shadow. Tomorrow, I would step into the light and watch their carefully constructed world crumble. As I fell asleep, I thought about Grandma Rose and the love she'd tried to give me. Tomorrow's justice wouldn't bring her back, but it would honor her memory and ensure that her final wishes were finally respected. The family that had discarded me was about to learn exactly what they'd lost. The morning of Jake's engagement party dawned crisp and clear, as if the universe itself was setting the stage for what was to come. I woke up feeling calmer than I had in months, with that strange peace that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. My phone buzzed with the usual pre-party chaos. Madison texting about some crisis with the catering. Mom calling to remind me to dress appropriately and not make a scene. Jake sending a list of family friends I should definitely not bore with my art stories. the familiar dance of managing my existence to accommodate their comfort. But today felt different because I knew it was the last time they'd ever speak to me with such casual contempt. I spent the morning putting finishing touches on my artistic contribution to their celebration. They'd asked for something personal and meaningful, and I'd delivered exactly that. The presentation I'd prepared would indeed capture the essence of their values, their greed, manipulation, and complete disregard for family bonds. Around noon, I drove to the venue, a historic mansion they'd rented using my inheritance money. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was funding my own public vindication. As I pulled into the circular driveway, I noticed Jake's new BMW and Mom's freshly detailed Mercedes, both purchased with Grandma's money. The venue was already bustling with activity. Caterers were setting up elegant table displays, florists were arranging massive bouquets, and a string quartet was tuning their instruments in the corner. Everything screamed expensive taste and old money class, the image my family desperately wanted to project. Madison spotted me first, rushing over in her designer heels with that practiced smile she reserved for family obligations. "Scarlett, oh my God, you look so nice. Thank you so much for coming early to help set up. We really need to get the display area organized for your presentation." She led me to a corner where they'd set up a small easel and table, clearly expecting some amateur family slideshow that guests could politely ignore. The condescension in her voice was palpable. She was doing me a favor by letting me participate in their sophisticated celebration. "This looks perfect," I said, setting down my laptop bag and the carefully prepared materials. "I think everyone's going to be really surprised by what I've put together." Jake appeared beside us, looking stressed but trying to maintain his golden boy composure. "Scarlett, thanks again for doing this. I know it's not really your scene, but it means a lot to have family involved." "Not my scene." As if I was some social outcast who couldn't navigate basic human interactions. The patronizing tone that had shaped my entire childhood was still there, but today it just made me smile. "Oh, don't worry about me," I replied. "I've been looking forward to this moment for weeks." Mom materialized from across the room, surveying the setup with her critical eye. She looked at my simple black dress with visible disapproval before turning to Madison. "The flowers look gorgeous, dear. And the catering smells divine. This is going to be such a memorable evening." She glanced at me briefly. "Scarlett, just remember what we discussed about keeping your little presentation brief. People will want to mingle, not sit through a long family history lesson." A long family history lesson. If only she knew how accurate that description would prove to be. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll make sure everyone understands exactly what kind of family we really are." She nodded absently, already moving on to micromanage other details. None of them heard the steel beneath my pleasant tone, or noticed the way I was memorizing every detail of their self-satisfied expressions. As guests began arriving, I watched my family transform into their public personas. Jake became the charming young professional regaling colleagues with stories of his business acumen and investment strategies. Mom morphed into the gracious society matron, accepting compliments on her successful children with false modesty. Madison played the perfect bride to be gracefully accepting congratulations while subtly showcasing her expensive ring. The guest list was exactly what I'd expected. Jake's colleagues from the investment firm Mom's Country Club friends, Madison's family with their old money connections, and various community leaders who'd known our family for years. These were the people who'd heard countless stories about the disappointing daughter who couldn't get her life together. I moved through the crowd, quietly listening to conversations, observing the social dynamics that had always made me feel like an outsider. But tonight, I wasn't the outsider anymore. I was the one with secret knowledge, the one holding all the cards. "Scarlett, how wonderful to see you, dear." Mrs. Henderson, Mom's longtime friend, approached with her usual mixture of pity and condescension. "Your mother tells us you're still doing your art projects. That's so persistent of you." "Actually, Mrs. Henderson, tonight I'm presenting something that perfectly combines my artistic skills with some fascinating family history. I think you'll find it quite illuminating." She smiled politely, clearly not expecting much from the family disappointment, and moved on to more promising conversations. Around 7 o'clock, Jake called for everyone's attention to begin the formal program. He and Madison posed for photos, accepted toasts from friends, and basked in the warm glow of celebration and approval. Watching them, I almost felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy. Almost. But then I remembered Grandma's voice on those recordings, confused and hurt when I stopped visiting. I remembered years of criticism, dismissal, and casual cruelty. I remembered the will that proved how much I'd meant to the one person who truly saw my worth. Before we continue with the celebration, Jake announced my sister Scarlett has prepared a special presentation about our family. She's always been the creative one, so I'm sure this will be really special. The creative one, the artistic one, the impractical one. All the labels they'd used to diminish my worth while stealing my inheritance were about to become my weapons. I stood up, accepting the microphone with a gracious smile. Thank you, Jake. And thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate love, family, and commitment. I've put together something that I think really captures the essence of who we are as a family, and some recent discoveries that have given me new perspective on what those relationships really mean. I moved to my laptop, connecting it to the large screen they'd set up for toasts and photos. The room settled into polite attention guests, expecting a standard family slideshow filled with childhood photos and sentimental memories. This presentation is dedicated to my grandmother, Rose, who passed away earlier this year. She taught me so much about love, loyalty, and the importance of truth. Tonight, I want to share some of those lessons with all of you. My finger hovered over the enter key, ready to launch the presentation that would destroy everything my family had built on lies. Around the room, guests settled back with their drinks prepared to endure a few minutes of family sentimentality before returning to the real celebration. They had no idea they were about to witness the most spectacular family implosion in recent memory. I pressed enter, and the first slide appeared on the screen, a beautiful photo of Grandma Rose and me from last Christmas, just weeks before she died. The room settled into respectful quiet as I began speaking. My grandmother was the heart of our family. She taught me about unconditional love, about seeing the best in people, and about the importance of truth. I clicked to the next slide. Grandma's house, her garden, the places where we'd shared our closest moments. When she passed away in February, I thought I'd lost not just a grandmother, but my strongest advocate in this family. Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the crowd. Mom dabbed at her eyes, dramatically playing the grieving daughter perfectly. Jake nodded solemnly, his arm around Madison. But recently I discovered that Grandma left me something more valuable than I ever imagined. Not just her love, but the truth about who we really are as a family. The next slide showed the two wills side by side. The fake one that gave everything to Jake, and the real one in Grandma's handwriting that left everything to me. A few guests leaned forward, confused by the legal documents on screen. You see, my grandmother wrote her will 6 months before she died, leaving her entire estate to me. But the will that was read at the lawyer's office was a forgery. My voice remained steady and clear as gasps began echoing through the room. The real will was hidden along with evidence of how that forgery was created. Jake's face had gone completely white. Scarlett, what are you doing? This isn't the time or place for. Actually, Jake, this is exactly the time and place. I clicked to the next slide. Bank statements showing massive transfers from Grandma's accounts to Jake's and Mom's accounts immediately after her death. Because this engagement party, this venue, your new car, Mom's kitchen renovation, even Madison's beautiful ring, all of it was paid for with money that was stolen from me. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Madison grabbed Jake's arm, her perfect composure cracking. Mom stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing without sound. But I wasn't finished. The next slide showed email exchanges between Mom and Jake planning how to convince Grandma that I was irresponsible and couldn't handle money. The slides that followed detailed their systematic campaign to isolate Grandma from me during her final months. They told her I was too busy to visit. They told me she didn't want to see me as often. They manipulated a dying woman to steal her granddaughter's inheritance. My voice carried clearly through the now silent room. But Grandma was smarter than they realized. I clicked to the audio player icon. She recorded her conversations with them because she suspected something was wrong. Would you like to hear what my loving family said when they thought no one was listening? Jake's voice filled the room through the sound system. She'll never know. Scarlett's too naive and trusting. Besides, what would she do with that much money anyway? Probably waste it on her ridiculous art projects. Then Mom's laughter, sharp and cruel. Exactly. We're really doing her a favor. This money will be put to much better use funding your business expansion and Madison's wedding expenses. Scarlett will be fine with whatever scraps we throw her. The audio continued, documenting their discussion of forging signatures, bribing lawyers, and creating false medical records. With each revelation, the guests' expressions shifted from confusion to horror to disgust. Madison's mother stood abruptly. "Madison, we're leaving. Now." "Mrs. Parker, please don't go," I called out pleasantly. "We're just getting to the best part. The part where justice actually gets served." I clicked to the next slide. Official letterhead from the district attorney's office. You see, will fraud is a serious crime. It carries penalties of up to 10 years in prison and restitution of treble damages. That means my loving family doesn't just owe me the original inheritance, they owe me $9 million. Jake finally found his voice. "You can't prove any of this. These documents could be faked." "Could they?" I smiled and clicked to the next slide. Photos of me meeting with FBI agents handing over the evidence. Because I've already turned everything over to federal investigators. Will fraud involving amounts over $1 million becomes a federal case, Jake? Did you know that the next slide showed the forensic analysis results confirming Grandma's handwriting on the real will and proving the fake one was forged? Then came the digital authentication of the audio recordings proving they hadn't been altered. The criminal charges were filed this morning. By now, your assets have been frozen pending investigation. I looked directly at Jake and Mom, watching the reality sink in. That includes your business accounts, Jake. And Mom, I'm afraid your country club membership fees might bounce. Mrs. Henderson clutched her pearls literally. "Patricia, is this true? Did you really steal from your own mother?" Mom finally found her voice, but it came out as a desperate shriek. "She's lying. She's always been jealous of Jake. She's mentally unstable." Actually, I clicked to the final slide. A photo of me signing papers in a lawyer's office. I'm mentally stable enough to have secured an excellent attorney and build an airtight case. Margaret Chen specializes in estate fraud, and she says this is one of the clearest cases she's ever seen. Jake lunged toward the laptop, but hotel security, whom I'd alerted earlier, stepped forward to block him. "Touch that equipment, Jake, and you'll add destruction of evidence to your charges." I addressed the room one final time. "I want everyone here to understand something. For 28 years, this family treated me like I was worthless. They told me I was the disappointment, the failure, the one who couldn't get her life together. They made me believe I deserved their scraps and their pity." My voice grew stronger. But my grandmother saw something different. She saw someone worth loving, worth investing in, worth believing in. And when she tried to give me that love through her will, they stole it. They didn't just steal money. They stole my final months with her, my chance to care for her, and my ability to honor her memory. The room was completely silent, except for Madison's quiet sobbing. "So, yes, I could have filed these charges quietly and handled this through the courts. But after years of public humiliation from this family, I thought they deserved to experience a little public accountability themselves." I packed up my laptop calmly while chaos erupted around me. Guests were leaving in droves, many stopping to pat my shoulder or whisper support. Jake stood frozen, his golden boy image shattered beyond repair. Mom had collapsed into a chair, her social standing destroyed in a single evening. "Oh, and Jake!" I called out as I headed for the exit. "Thanks for inviting me out of pity. This was absolutely perfect. The next 72 hours unfolded like watching dominoes fall in slow motion, except each domino represented another piece of my family's carefully constructed facade crashing to the ground. By Sunday morning, the story had exploded across local news and social media. Someone at the party had live-streamed portions of my presentation, and the video went viral with hashtags like "number family fraud exposed" and "number grandma revenge." The comment sections were filled with people sharing their own stories of family betrayal and cheering for what many called the most satisfying justice moment ever. My phone rang constantly. Reporters wanting interviews, distant relatives expressing shock and support, and surprisingly, several people offering business opportunities. It seemed my public takedown had demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking and backbone that investors appreciated. But the most satisfying calls came from Jake and Mom themselves, though not for reasons they intended. Jake called first, his voice a mixture of rage and desperation. "Scarlett, you have to fix this. My firm put me on administrative leave pending investigation. They're talking about termination for moral turpitude clauses." Madison's family called off the engagement. Her father says he can't have his daughter associated with criminals. I let him vent for a full minute before responding. "That sounds really stressful, Jake. Have you considered that this might all be happening because you committed serious felonies? It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone. You didn't even know about the money until now." I didn't know about the money, but I knew about the isolation from Grandma. I knew about years of being treated like garbage while you lived high on stolen funds. The money just explained why. Please, Scarlett. We're family. There has to be a way to work this out privately. Family. The word that had been weaponized against me for years was now their desperate plea for mercy. You're right, Jake. We are family. And family doesn't steal from each other, lie to dying grandmothers, or invite their siblings to parties out of pity. But I'm sure your new lawyer can explain all of this to you. I hung up and immediately received a call from Mom, whose approach was predictably different. "How could you do this to us?" she screamed, before I even said hello. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. You've destroyed this family. Actually, Mom, you destroyed this family when you chose to steal from your own mother and gaslight your daughter. I just made it public. You're going to regret this. When you're sitting alone in that pathetic apartment with no family left, you'll realize what you've thrown away." Her words might have hurt once, but now they just revealed how completely she misunderstood the situation. "Mom, I threw away people who never loved me anyway. What I gained was self-respect and justice for Grandma. That seems like a pretty good trade." The legal proceedings moved faster than anyone expected. Margaret Chen called Monday morning with updates that exceeded my wildest hopes. "The federal prosecutors are very interested in this case," she reported. "Will fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud? They're looking at serious prison time." But here's the interesting part. Jake's employer is conducting their own investigation because he used his position of trust in their firm to establish credibility with the lawyer who helped forge the will. It turned out that Jake had leveraged his job at the investment firm to convince the corrupt lawyer that the family was financially sophisticated and trustworthy. The firm considered this a massive liability and breach of their ethical standards. "They're not just firing him," Margaret continued. "They're reporting him to financial regulators, which will make it nearly impossible for him to work in finance again." Mom's consequences were equally devastating, but more socially oriented. The charity boards she served on began quietly requesting her resignation after news of the fraud broke. Her country club friends stopped returning calls. The social empire she'd built over decades crumbled overnight. But perhaps the most satisfying development was completely unexpected. On Wednesday, I received a call from my great-aunt Helen, Grandma's younger sister. "Scarlett, honey, I've been thinking about everything that's come out, and I need to tell you something important." Her voice was gentle but determined. "Your grandmother called me 3 weeks before she died. She was worried because Patricia and Jake were pressuring her to change her will, and she'd hidden the real one because she didn't trust them. This was news to me." "She called you about the will. She did more than that, sweetheart. She asked me to watch out for you after she was gone because she suspected they might try to cut you out completely. She also told me about a safety deposit box that no one else knows about. My heart stopped. A safety deposit box, Box 379 at First National Bank downtown branch. She gave me the key and made me promise to give it to you if anything suspicious happened with her will. After what came out at that party, I think now's the time. The next day, Helen and I met at the bank. The safety deposit box contained documents that made my case even stronger. Additional evidence of Jake and Mom's manipulation, but also something wonderful letters Grandma had written to me over the years but never sent, expressing her pride in my artistic talents and her hopes for my future. One letter dated just a month before her death brought tears to my eyes. My dearest Scarlett, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you've discovered the truth about your inheritance. I want you to know that every penny I left you was earned through love. Love for your kind heart, your creative spirit, and your strength in staying true to yourself despite this family's cruelty. Use this gift to build the life you've dreamed of and know that I'm proud of the woman you've become. But the box contained one more surprise. Another will, even more recent than the hidden one I'd found, that included additional assets I hadn't known about, more properties, more investments, a collection of valuable art pieces that Grandma had quietly acquired over the years. Margaret calculated the total value nearly $4 million in additional assets that Jake and Mom had never even known existed, assets they couldn't steal because they didn't know about them. As I sat in the bank reading Grandma's letters, I realized something profound had shifted. The scared, people-pleasing daughter who had walked into that engagement party was gone forever. In her place was someone who understood her own worth, someone who wouldn't accept crumbs or beg for love from people incapable of giving it. My family had taught me an invaluable lesson, just not the one they intended. They'd shown me that blood doesn't automatically create love, that loyalty must be earned, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's cruelty. Justice wasn't just about the money or the criminal charges. It was about finally seeing clearly who deserved my energy, my trust, and my love. 6 months later, I stood in the grand opening of Rose Gallery, named after my grandmother, watching people admire the work of 12 emerging artists whose talents had been overlooked by traditional establishments. The space was everything I'd dreamed of. Exposed brick walls displaying bold, innovative pieces, natural light streaming through tall windows, and the sound of genuine appreciation for art that challenged conventional expectations. The legal proceedings had concluded exactly as Margaret predicted. Jake received 18 months in federal prison for will, fraud, and conspiracy, plus an additional 2 years for the financial crimes related to his abuse of his professional position. Mom got 12 months and extensive community service, though her real punishment was the complete destruction of her social standing. They were also ordered to pay full restitution of $9.7 million. The original inheritance, plus penalties, and the additional assets from Grandma's secret safety deposit box. The money had been returned to me with interest, giving me the foundation to build not just the gallery but an entire new life. But the financial victory, satisfying as it was, paled in comparison to the personal transformation I'd experienced. Standing here tonight surrounded by artists who reminded me of my younger self, passionate, talented, but lacking confidence or support, I understood that Grandma's true gift wasn't the money. It was the validation that I deserved love, respect, and the chance to pursue my dreams without apology. "Scarlett, this place is incredible," said David Martinez, one of the featured artists whose photography captured the beauty in overlooked urban spaces. "When you reached out to me, I thought it was too good to be true. Galleries like this don't usually take chances on people like us." "People like us are exactly who this gallery exists for," I replied, watching his face light up as a collector showed serious interest in his work. My grandmother believed in investing in people who had something important to say, even when others couldn't see their value. That's what we're doing here. The evening continued with a steady stream of visitors' sales that would change several artists' lives, and the deep satisfaction of knowing I was using my resources to lift others up rather than tear them down. The contrast with my biological family's approach to power couldn't have been starker. Around 9 o'clock, I was surprised to see a familiar face among the crowd. Margaret Chen approached with a warm smile, admiring a sculpture near the entrance. "I had to see what you built with your victory," she said. "This is remarkable, Scarlett. Your grandmother would be so proud." "She would, wouldn't she?" I looked around the gallery, imagining Grandma Rose walking through the space, probably stopping to chat with every artist about their inspiration and technique. "I keep thinking about something she wrote in one of those letters. That the best revenge against people who try to diminish you is to become exactly who you were meant to be." Margaret nodded thoughtfully. "Speaking of revenge, I thought you'd like to know that Jake's appeals were denied last week. He'll serve the full sentence. And your mother's community service involves working at a legal aid clinic helping elderly clients understand their rights regarding wills and estate planning." The judge had quite a sense of irony. We shared a laugh at that poetic justice, but then Margaret's expression grew more serious. "Have you heard from either of them since the sentencing?" I shook my head. "Jake sent one letter from prison asking me to put money in his commissary account." I didn't respond. "Mom has called a few times, usually when she's drunk, alternating between blaming me for destroying the family and asking for financial help. I don't answer those calls anymore." "How do you feel about that silence?" It was a good question, one I'd been exploring with my therapist for months. "Peaceful," I said finally. For years, I thought cutting them off would leave this huge hole in my life. But it turns out when you remove people who constantly drain your energy and criticize your worth, you make space for relationships that actually nurture you. As if summoned by my words, Helen appeared beside us carrying 2 glasses of wine and beaming with pride. At 73, my great aunt had become something I'd never had before. A true family advocate who celebrated my successes without jealousy or conditions. "Scarlett, dear, the reporter from the Arts Weekly wants to interview you about the gallery's mission. Are you ready for that?" The idea of media attention once would have terrified me, but now it felt like an opportunity to share a message that might help others in similar situations. The interview went well with the reporter, particularly interested in how personal trauma had influenced my approach to supporting emerging artists. I found myself sharing parts of my story publicly for the first time. Not for revenge or attention, but because I realized my experience might encourage others to stand up for themselves. "Many people stay in toxic family relationships because they're afraid of being alone," I told the reporter. "What I learned is that being alone is infinitely better than being with people who make you feel worthless. And once you free yourself from that toxicity, you discover there are people in the world who will love and support you exactly as you are." As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, I stood alone in the gallery, surrounded by art that told stories of resilience, creativity, and the beauty that emerges when people are given the space to flourish. My phone buzzed with a text from David the photographer. "Sold 3 pieces tonight. This changes everything for me and my kids. Thank you for believing in my work when no one else would." I smiled, thinking about how Grandma's love had rippled outward in ways she never could have imagined. Her support for me had created this gallery, which was now changing lives for artists and their families who would go on to inspire others, creating an endless cycle of positive impact. That's when it hit me. The most beautiful revenge against a family that tried to diminish me wasn't their downfall, though justice had been satisfying. The real victory was becoming someone who lifted others up instead of tearing them down, someone who created beauty instead of destruction, someone who loved unconditionally rather than conditionally. As I locked up the gallery and headed home to my beautiful apartment filled with art and plants and evidence of a life lived authentically, I thought about that Christmas day when Mom had said I was only invited out of pity. She'd been right about one thing. I didn't need their pity anymore. I had something far more valuable, the knowledge that I was worthy of real love, genuine respect, and the courage to demand both. The family that raised me had taught me what I didn't want to become. The family I'd chosen, Helen, my artists, my true friends, and the memory of Grandma Rose, had shown me who I actually was. And that person was pretty magnificent. So tell me, have you ever had to choose between toxic family loyalty and your own self-worth? How did you handle discovering that the people closest to you weren't who you thought they were? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one because your stories matter to me. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it. Subscribe for more real-life stories about standing up for yourself and finding justice in unexpected ways. And share this with anyone who needs to hear that they deserve better than settling for crumbs of love from people who should cherish them. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of this community where we celebrate the courage it takes to choose yourself. Remember, the best families aren't always the ones we're born into. Sometimes they're the ones we create through love, respect, and genuine care for each other's happiness. Until next time, keep believing in your own worth and never let anyone convince you to accept less than you deserve.